Toru Rua Tahi on. What's up? What's going on? Yes, right. So we are getting this episode going. It is Monday. It is the start of your week. Depending on when you are listening to this, it could be a Wednesday afternoon. You could be walking. You could be driving. You could be flying. You could be cooking. And other verbs that you might be doing. But anyway, thank you for coming and joining another episode of the podcast. Sick As Podcast. Sharing it around. I see there's a lot of unique listeners now, so thank you for joining me. I know you know what this is all about, but anyway, we're going to get into it. Here is a poem that has been sent in. It is called Distracted. My mind is in the distance, my eyes on the work. Right now, I don't know the difference of if this is good or will this hurt. Thought that it'd pass in a day or two. Phone lights up, under my breath I pray it's you. Heart says go for it, logical brain says get over it. It's not often I have a passion or feel anything other than emotionless. I'm distracted and it's taken over my whole system, and you know the one thing to make it better would to be with them. Not sure if it's because I'm insecure and more worried than before, that I just take the silence as a sign that the horse has run its course. And just as we go beyond the horizon, my mind creates a scenario where I see your eyes blink, and it's like all of a sudden I'm transported to a time when my ears heard and felt your heart beat for the first time and last time. That is sent in from Cupid from the Knighthood of the Travelling Trousers, and could be about love. It could be about the first time you ever felt safe in something and having that taken away. It could be anything. You know, I think every time we think about love and think about places that we felt safe, or thinking about the times where you were finally present with something, we tend to think about them as people. But you know, sometimes it could have just been an environment that you were in. An environment that made you feel safe, an environment that made you feel like a superhuman. You know, because if you look at the Justice League, or if you look at the different superheroes, of course they have their own movies and they're doing their own things, but in the Avengers, kind of like when they go to see what they've been doing, they've just been doing some regular ass stuff. And that's something we forget with celebrities, I think. They still have to wash their jeans. Do you ever think about that? Do you ever think about what celebrities have to do? Oh, sorry, I sound disgusting. Like how celebrities are just people. And yes, they can be in movies and they do have jobs and they have to prepare for different things. But like just, you know, one of them flipping an egg and just doing regular ass stuff and just like waking up with morning breath and then having to brush their teeth. I don't know. I think it's quite nice sometimes to think about that, just to realize like, we're not that far removed. Anyway, this is another episode of the Sick As Podcast. Today, it is a topic that came up because I've been writing an application for the next 3 years of my life. And I'm starting to see that I'm putting a lot of my homies on the map, and I'll explain that a little bit more soon, so let's get into the episode. Are we born to live, or are we born to work? This is not a second poem, but I'm pretty sure that was by the Shakespeare himself. It is an important question. You know, that is the question. Were we born to live or born to work? It's like, are we dying to live or living to die? I guess it depends on how you frame it, the perspective that you take when you come into it. And this all started because I'm writing an application, as I said before, for my postdoctoral studies. And what that is after your doctorate, you then, you know, kind of confirm yourself as a researcher or a lone researcher, someone who can go out as the principal investigator and lead out on your own project. So kind of, I think the thinking around this is that if you do postdoctoral studies, you then have another career pathway. Like this is to start you on your career pathway as a fully fledged researcher. So that's been cool, like thinking about it, the support that I've had, the people telling me like, oh, okay, you need to do your postdoc, you will do your postdoc. So I've had no doubts from other people that I was someone who could do a postdoc. As part of that, just like I did for my PhD, you come up with a proposal to do research. I don't want to talk about it just yet because it's due, the application's due in about a week. And then after that, the results don't come out till around November. Now, my intellectual property in terms of the thoughts, because it's all original thought, and I'm not saying someone's going to steal it, but you have to be protective of this sort of stuff, because these are then the ideas that inform like my career. So I'll talk about it a little bit soon, but what I can talk about is the themes that are coming out, and what I'm very big on, and what I've always been big on, is well-being, health, as well as probably something that we don't talk about too often, but is like researcher health and researcher well-being, or just job health and job health, well-being, and how I think we're still in a place, and I felt it last year, and I've talked about it on here multiple times, but when I did go into different places, I felt like I had to really prove myself, and I felt like I had to give just so much, just to feel like I actually belonged where I was. And someone was telling me the other day, they're like, oh, it sounds like you have imposter syndrome. And it's not. I do feel like I belong. I do feel like I'm good enough to be there. I just feel like the amount of work that I have to put in compared to others, let's say the less tanned type, we have to do a little bit more just to kind of prove our significance, or just remind them that we actually do belong in the academy. So I think what that drives, and it's probably not just, I'm probably seeing it because I am on the outside, but they probably feel like that too. There's probably elements of that where you feel like you have to work just to feel like you belong, and that's because we're living in this society that will. I hate saying we live in a society where, but we do. We live in something that is going to perpetuate, the norms of high productivity as great, and mediocre productivity as like probably lazy. And like we do, like if we look at job descriptions, if we look at people who get awarded for different things, always going above and beyond. Now, if you think about any community member that you've highly valued in your life, it's usually someone who does go above and beyond. They will have their job description, but then they are doing other things outside, like the reciprocity or the relationships that they build with different people around the place, just because that's just the type of person they are. And I think coming from an Indigenous perspective and coming into a very Western way of working, the productivity itself, so yes, we publish papers, yes, we do the research, all that sort of stuff, but it's the additional stuff. It's the community service that we just, it's inherent in our way of viewing the world. Like, we don't feel like you have that significance unless you are giving back. And what I'm trying to do, what I'm thinking about doing is building that into, my work application. And when I am doing it, highlighting the different things that we do as innate parts of how we would research anyway, and being able to find a way that can actually quantify that and it be rewarded, rather than it being additional service that we always have to give, and we find ourselves on the back foot or getting to a point of burnout. Now, I've been at the point multiple times now where I'm just like, okay, I love this work, I love this job, but is it going to kill me? Is this something that, if I continue to do this, am I going to be happy? Am I going to be able to build a family? Am I going to be able to have my family and then reprioritize, and then be able to say, no, this is family time and this is work time? Because at the moment, all I do is work. But then at the same time, I don't have any dependents. I don't have anyone depending on me. I don't have, anyone waiting at home for me. I'm just doing my thing. And I know that sounds sad, but at this point in my career, I just think that's where I'm at. So I haven't just considering this a little bit more. I think putting a bit more time and exploring maybe how we could use a few ways. So this is what I was doing when I was writing this application, is when I write this application, I'm writing my own job description, basically, because I get to write the proposal, and I get to, in this, say, this is what I want to do, this is what I'm committing to doing, and I don't want to overcommit. So my first big one was just saying, look, I don't want to do any additional research to this. Like, this is the research I want to focus in on for the next 3 years. It's what I did with my PhD. I turned down a lot of external opportunities because I knew I wanted to finish my PhD on time, and I ended up doing it, finishing it before time. So there's that, but also this is a really good chance to reset and grow myself as a researcher. So within it, I've highlighted different skills that I want to get good at. So this gives me time to actually get to a point of mastery. And I've spoken before that mastery is the best way to get into some sort of flow, because when you're learning a new skill that's slightly more difficult than the skills that you already have, all you can do is focus in your time on that skill. So that gives you that time to be present, that gives you that time to be mindful, and in that you actually get to have time to feel yourself, but then also progress yourself. And that self-progression, if you have some sort of purpose, which is I'm growing the skill so that in the future I can actually be able to serve better. If that's your purpose, if that's your why, or if that's your goal, which is my goal. I don't see myself as someone here to grow my own platform, but I see myself as like someone who was born for service and someone who was born just to make other people's lives happier. Why do you think I come on and do this podcast when, obviously it's going to be good for my own mind because I get to talk through my ideas, but I get messages from people who just say, hearing your voice, hearing what you talk about, and just kind of normalizing some of the things you talk about, just you being scared of social situations or being dealing with different things and how you go through it in just a very chill out way, just a way that just like you would say, hey, how's your day? And it's just like, oh yeah, it's all good. What'd you have for dinner? But then I'm just talking about, I cried the other day, that sort of stuff. So being able to put that out there, that's because I know as much as it might hurt for me to confront it, I know that other people will hear it and maybe have a better day because of it. It might put a smile on someone's face. It might make someone feel like they're not alone in this. And I know that sounds really cliche and stuff because a lot of people are like, I don't want you to feel alone. But a lot of people do feel alone because the people who are putting out that content have everything. They have nice pillows. They have a nice heated house. They have a good job. They don't have to work if they don't want to because they have that privilege of falling back. But we all know that your boy started from the bottom. Now we here. And when I say now we here, not quite here. I'm still working to do different things. But, I love that my life to this point has been for me to be able to serve. But it's also served me and, being able to give so I can give twice as much each time because of what I'm getting in return. And it's just doing things that I love. So yeah, they do say, work a job you love and you'll never work another day in your life. Now, I'm deconstructing that. So this is where I'm doing work that I extremely love, but there are aspects of it that are definitely going to kill me. So that's what this episode's about. It's a very long way of going around. But basically, there's this word that comes up a lot of the time, and I've talked about it before, and it is burnout. Now, my first thing is to distinguish whether you're being burnt out or whether you're just languishing. So the first one is, are you uninspired? When you are feeling a bit meh, you can still do the work, you can still be pretty dormant and tick along, but you're not getting to a point where you just absolutely have to quit it, throw in the towel. That is what I'd consider burnout, like being a bit more tired, being a bit more unenthusiastic. Sometimes that is just languishing, and that's just because you're getting stale in it. But burnout is to the point where you actually get scared that there's a possibility that everything's just way too overwhelming. So I think we can distinguish that first. And my big thing really now is how do I, and this is what institutions love. And if we're living in a capitalist society, how do we maximize productivity while minimizing the cost that it's going to be? So how do we get people to do more with less? So if we're avoiding burnout, the common question is, well, what is the threshold? What is the threshold that we can push someone to just before they get to that point? Then we can rein it back. But I think avoiding burnout in this case is finding, so what I found, instead of, sometimes you have to play the system, what I found a couple of different ways that we can actually avoid burnout by finding things within our jobs or finding things within our work that we can actually love and that'll actually help us to bring in another day. So the reason why this has all come up is because, like I said, we're doing this application, and it's the massive chat and hype around work still, which I'm still hearing in all these different meetings, is that, the people who go above and beyond, that's service, that's love, and a lot of the service, some people can get it credited, and some people just kind of do it because that's the way that they are, and it's usually those people who don't get the credit, who don't get the recognition, who would have done it anyway, but there are other people who are cashing in on this because they know that that's the way the system works. They know how to work it all. I think right now, it's also an interesting shift in trying to avoid this burnout, is that we've also seen that there's a dismantling of the 9 to 5 system, especially for the jobs where you can work remotely. And that is because, we've had lockdowns and we had people producing as much work, if not more, in lockdown settings where they weren't coming in at 9 o'clock and then having to clock out at 5. What we found was we had, better chances to be productive when we had pockets of time, when we were in places that we wanted to be, and we didn't always have to be at our desk. I think the micromanaging or the having to be there at 9 to 5, that school system, that ringing of the bell is very factory driven, and it was just like, okay, you can keep going and keep going and keep going. But factory manual labor, like obviously it's pretty monotonous. It's you doing a task over and over. But if you do a job like I do, or if you do a job like most people, it's going to take little energy bursts, different types of energy. So you're going to jump between tasks a lot of the time, which uses a lot of your brain power. And the more we jump between tasks, because, and you're set in one setting, the less effective we can become. So every time you have to have multiple tasks and you're shifting between them, firstly, it takes energy to shift between tasks, but then also to get back onto task and then try to get back into flow. By the time that all kind of happens, you're then moving into another task. And that seems to be the case when you're there in person. You have people distracting you, you have other things coming in, and then you just have things that weren't part of your agenda that then come in and decide how you're going to work. So I think with having lockdowns, this is a really good place to start showing, like, okay, that system's dismantled. For some people it works, for some people it doesn't. Like I remember when I wrote my PhD application, I would work from 11 p.m. to 3 a.m. So I just switched my clock upside down because the world was quiet, nothing was on social media, nothing was happening out externally. But during the day, I just got so distracted with all these other things that I was just like, okay, I work better in the evening. And you can do that when you're working remote and when you're, not having to be in that factory type setting. Another thing is that, this is a really random thought. So I'm writing an application again, okay? So I wrote my last application in 2017, and now it's 2022. And I've gone back to my playlist that I was listening to when I was writing that application. And it's weird because one song triggered it, and then I started listening to the other songs while I was writing that application. So yeah, do you get transported in time when you listen to different songs? So yeah, these songs just took me back to writing these applications. I'm like, wow, that's so cool. All right. Oh my gosh, that was so tangential. It was it's 15 minutes, gosh. Okay, so we've all seen the jar that guy. So if you've seen this video, there's a jar that a guy fills up, okay? And this is talking about time. So when we go to work, we have time. And when we're at our job, this is where you're like, okay, I'm going to quit this job if I don't. But this is when we start to get into priorities. And I know for a lot of us, this is a very privileged way of thinking, what are the priority tasks at work? But this is where I'm at, and this is kind of something I started to think about when I was putting this application together to write my own JD. There's a guy, okay, he has this jar. He fills it with some big rocks. And then the big rocks are kind of, he's put it in. He asks everyone, does this mean that the jar is full? Everyone goes, oh, yeah, it's full. And he's like, oh, is that so? And then he puts in pebbles, right? The pebbles start going into the jar. It's filling it all up. And then he's just like, what about now? Would you say that this is full? Then everyone's like, yeah, no, that's full. He's like, oh, is that so? And then he gets a very small, small grain, aka sand, that's what it's called, sand, Bondi sands. And he puts it in, and then it starts to fill all the cracks. Now is it full? And everyone's like, oh, yeah, it is. I see what you did here, you cheeky bastard. So basically, the big rocks are the priorities. The pebbles are the things that you can so the big rocks are the things that take up the most space. But you see that there's space for other stuff to come in as well. What we find, with having to do emails, with having to do all these other jobs that you find are taking you away from your purpose, is when people fill the jar the other way, where they fill it all with sand, and then you can't fit any of the rocks, the big rocks. You can't fit any pebbles because all of that time is taken up by the sand. Am I going to get copyrighted for copying someone else's idea? But no, this is my interpretation of it, so back off. So basically what I've done is I've identified what my golf balls are. So, my golf balls. what the big rocks are. So that's the prioritization of my time. So there's discretionary time versus satisfactory time. There's the stuff that you kind of like, oh yeah, I have this sort of time, but this is the stuff that actually makes you feel satisfied in your job. And a lot of the research around job satisfaction and people feeling good in their job is looking at where people kind of focus their attention. I've always said where the attention goes, the mind flows. So it's interesting that we're now thinking, okay, so during lockdown, what was the thing that made us less satisfied? Or we had all the time in the world and all we've been asking for is more time, right? Why is that? Why is it that even though we got all the time in the world, we were less satisfied? Obviously, we were locked up and we couldn't do as much as we wanted to do. But what they found is there's a sweet spot between 2 hours and 5 hours. So if you have less than 2 hours a day of just discretionary time where you want to do your own thing, if you have less than that, you can find that you have less job satisfaction or less life satisfaction in general. But on the other side, if you have more than 5 hours of like discretionary time to do what you want, you actually start to feel like, okay, I'm unsatisfied with all of this. And it's mostly because you feel like you're not aiming towards something. So yes, you could feel like I'm going to quit my job and have the best time of my life. But how many people do you know that retired, that now mow everyone's lawns, do some sort of reading for different people? Everyone kind of wants to feel like they're part of that social connection, that cohesion, which is the greater community, which is working towards something, unless you are someone who just probably doesn't like that sort of stuff. But I haven't come across many of those people. Basically, what I'm saying is the more time you have, it seems better, but there is a sweet spot between that 2 and 5 hour point. So a lot of that is finding those pockets of time where you can actually use it for the stuff that you enjoy. So that's the video there that we were talking about. And then here are some activities that we can get through just to see, what are the things that matter. And what are the other things that kind of fill our days without us saying no often, without us just realizing that this is the stuff that's causing us to feel languishing. So maybe we're not burning out just yet because we haven't taken as much responsibility as we thought we would, but maybe also we are just languishing because we're doing the stuff that we don't enjoy. This is the stuff that I'm just like, I have to do this stuff. This is not leading me towards the stuff that I thought I signed up to this job for. So the activities, identify the resource aspect of your time. And then this is where we start to realize that time is actually a resource, because where you put it, it starts to run out, and then the other things that you wanted to do don't then have the resource, which is your time to be able to do it. Or even if you do have the time to be able to do it, you don't actually have the same oomph that you would usually have if you had prioritized it to begin with. And it's all about being optimal, right? So with your resources that you have, if you do stuff at the beginning, you might have a different energy for if you were to do it at the end. Or if you're feeling like you're having to fitting your priority stuff around the other stuff, which we call the sand stuff, then you're starting to feel like, oh man, I resent the big stuff because I only have so little time to do it, that by the time I get to it, I can't do a good job of it. And it starts to make you question whether it is something you enjoy. But it is something you enjoy, you just haven't prioritized it properly. Now, this is going to seem like I'm gaslighting and I'm telling you it's all your fault. There are definitely systematic things or systemic things that happen to stop you getting to that sort of point. We can talk about distractions. When I talk about Karl Marx and he was saying that, sport is the opiate of the masses. So it's finding little things that maybe people keep you distracted by, so that the big things that you're wanting to work towards don't necessarily get the same time, don't get your optimal time that you could come forward. Am I a conspiracy theorist? I've believed in at least 7 in my lifetime, so maybe I am. But anyway, so with these activities in your job, one of the biggest things that leads to job satisfaction is someone having social connection. And then the things that cause less satisfaction are usually the commute time as well as the actual work. So yes, you love going to work, but the actual jobs and some of the jobs that you do is what leads to less satisfaction. So that kind of sounds like, should we just quit our job? Should we just not have jobs at all? But I think it's important that we break down, what those actually mean to us. So the social connection, mine would be, mine is so different to other people's. And I think a lot of you listening definitely would agree with me, because, you're listening to this for a reason, because you're listening to how an introvert has to go through a social world. I like one-on-ones. I like coffee with individuals where I can get to understand them, but also make them feel understood. And then the ones who understand me as well. That's who I'd like to put time in. Me being in a room with a bunch of people doing different things, I don't like office spaces where I don't have my own space. I like being by myself to be able to do my work because the other stuff actually tires me. That's the stuff that takes me out of my groove and makes me feel like, I'm being social, yeah, but it's not deep connection. That's not the connection that I need. Other people might be so different. They might just need to sit in a room with a bunch of people and not necessarily interact. So finding that social connection, what is the social connection for you that actually feels best? And this is something they've asked the question before and I've been like, hey, do you have a best friend? Would you consider you have a best friend at work? The people who could easily identify one or two of these people have better job satisfaction than those who couldn't. So it's something about a deep social connection. And to be honest, most times that best friend is someone that you just have there to vibe with and laugh with, but also send a little bit of rumors, bit of what do you call that word? But gossip around the place. But usually, if you have someone who is considered your best friend, that's a very predictive measure of whether you're going to have satisfaction at work. So what that looks like to each different person is going to be different. So that's something that you can look into as well. And for me, usually the commuting time, if you're in a stressful environment, it's going to be. But if you can batch that with something that you enjoy, like listening to my beautiful voice on this podcast during your commute time, then that starts to become time that you can use for yourself. So I think the commute time, if you're all stressed and having to drop people off and doing all this different thing, that is stressful, and that's going to add to you feeling like you're burning out, and the commute time to work then is associated with going to work. So yes, but if you transform it so that becomes a time where you're listening to a podcast, you're listening to music, you finally get to listen to your books that you wanted to do, or just using it as your exercise, get a bit of walking and all that sort of stuff, then the commute time is then a power for you. Like, it's usually leading to less satisfaction, but if you turn it into the things that you actually enjoy doing, then it becomes good. And then the work. Now, I have high satisfaction at my job because of the work that I'm doing, but I am in a very privileged position where a lot of people back me, they support me, and they know that this is the stuff that I want to do, and they distract me from the other stuff. So they will make sure my name is not in the meeting stuff. They will make sure I only have to go to the things that I have to go to. They've set the world up for me to be able to do that sort of stuff, but I understand for other people, it's not the same way. So what I would do, and this is what I used to do when I had to do, little cruddy tasks that would take me away from my job, is I would ask, why am I doing this? So firstly, why am I showing up to work? My showing up to work is because I want to help communities. I want to make sure that our communities are better off because of the information that is coming out. And then when I get given different tasks, I just know this is part of the institution. It's part of the process that actually helps me to continue doing my job so that at the end I can come back to my goal. This is why it's so important to ask what your why is, because your why reminds you of why you have to do the monotonous tasks. Sometimes, though, if you continue to ask that why and you're wondering, why the heck am I still doing these tasks, you can then start to see, okay, I have to say no to that because really it doesn't come back. Like, I'm continuing to do this, and I can't see the pathway from me continuing to do this to where I want to get to. So that's always a good one as well. So it's just always coming back to have that reflection, to just see where your mind's at, to see where your time's at. And reframe work, the part of it where you can actually see it as meaningful will bring you joy, and that kind of reminds you of the positive impact that you can have on this world, and realizing that was what brings you joy. That's what brings that smile to you, or that energy for you to go forward and do all of that work. So why is it important in the moment? Maybe it's not. And that's where you start to see, do I continue doing this then if this is not going to contribute? Or do I know that this is a necessary pathway to get to where I need to be? So that's what I get into. So maybe it's not the thing that serves you. Maybe it's the things that was the fun stuff. Why was it fun? All of that sort of stuff. So start to question why you're doing the different things that you're doing at work. Is it necessary? Is it not? And if you have the potential to be able to do it, what do you call it when you look at something again? Rebalance blah, 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 blah. Look at your goals again, look at your purpose, and see what starts to align with those different things. I understand that there are some jobs where you cannot do this, but in this world where everyone's using your brain and your capital and your ideas, and then they make you do a lot of service and you're not getting paid for it, I think we're in a space where we start to realize that they need you. Everyone needs you. But we also need you to be the best that you can be, because that's what's going to help us the best. So you're your own star player, and we need to start looking after that. Anyway, I hope you took something positive away from this. It was all over the place. I'm all over the place. I've recorded a couple of episodes this weekend. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know how you get on. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you're enjoying the poems. Hopefully we can make some sort of poem book by the end of this. But anyway, love you all. Take care.